What are the things you want to know about shadow people? Answering your questions next. Welcome again to Haunted Road Media. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. Explore with us. As we continue to explore the realm of shadow people, and of course, highlighting the new book, A Walk in the Shadows, which you can get through the link in the description below, I decided to put out a question on social media asking you guys what your questions are about shadow people. So this video is for you. And if you want to know where you can get this shirt, it's at our Spreadshirt shop, so shop.spreadshirt.com. This first question is from Victoria Monday. Why do most think they're evil? I've had one follow me around and I felt very protected by him. So shadow people by nature, with the way they look, are, very dark, very mysterious, don't really have any features. Occasionally they might have eyes, but when they do, they're usually red, very contrasting against the darkness, shadowy, mysterious. And people fear what they don't understand, and so they fear that mystery. And these things do tend to lurk around in the shadows, although some are seen during the day. But they're not all evil. Sure, there are some that are evil, nasty, and nefarious, and do bad things to people. But like human beings, there are some shadow people that are good and some shadow people that are bad. Of course, we may not know immediately which one is which. But there are certainly plenty of shadow people that are not evil. And of course, we have an entire video on that as well. This is a question from Tim Schoen. Are all shadow people sentient, i.e. can they communicate with each other as well as with us should they so desire? So this is a question that has come up a lot recently. Do shadow people have voices? And yeah, they do in a sense. Now they don't really have the mouth part. They don't have the vocal feature because they're just all a shadow. They don't have mouths. So they seem to communicate telepathically, like what they're trying to impart on you as far as their message ends up in your mind. You hear their voice in your head. Now there's also the question, do they communicate with each other? And well, some of these shadow people do appear like they may communicate with each other. Sometimes like the Hat Man will come in flanked by a couple of other shadow people, usually humanoid figures. Now they have to be able to communicate to some degree with each other in order to appear there together, right? And then I've heard other accounts of shadow people and perhaps other entities may be interacting with each other. So there may be some communication there as well. This is from Dawn Godzi. Can your loved ones visit you in a shadow state just to make sure you are okay, or possibly warn you about an upcoming illness? So this is a good question. This gets into what are shadow people. And I believe a quote-unquote true shadow person is an interdimensional being. However, there are some shadows that appear that are not that interdimensional being thing. They are actually human spirits trying to manifest and can't appear as an apparition for one reason or another, and they come across as a shadow. Now, of course, in A Walk in the Shadows, we have a very lengthy story by my good friend Rob Guttrow, who tells about an incident with his aunt who tried to appear to him to deliver a message to his mother, and because she had spent so much energy making the trip to where he was that she couldn't fully manifest as that apparition and could only come across as a shadow. We also have a interesting story in here about an apparition of a little girl that we saw after she had previously been black smoke at the end of the hall. So she came from the end of the hall as that smoke and ended up manifesting completely as the apparition. So yeah, some of these shadows are actually human spirits. We do have a video on that as well. This is from Trish Eastman. What's with all the 1950s style men's hats and dress shoes? So she's basically asking about the Hat Man. Why do a lot of people see these shadow entities dressed in what would be a fedora, maybe a trench coat, the shoes, the whole works, looking like something out of a Dashiell Hammett novel or Sam Spade or whatever, your classic noir PI from back in the 1940s. Well, not all hat people, not all shadow people appear with hats. Some of them do, and it's not always the fedora style hat. Sometimes it's a top hat, and sometimes they may or may not be wearing a cape. There are some that have appeared in archer hats. I've heard that once. I've also heard recently the Zorro hat, like the big wide brimmed hat like that. So there's a lot of different hats that they may be wearing. As to why they are wearing this, It could be that they're trying to mimic some sort of style that perhaps there's a lot of different theories we can get into here, but if they are perhaps outside of the realm of time or time as we think it, and they're trying to come across as some sort of humanoid entity to us, because they are appearing for the most part in a human shape, just happen to wearing the hat. Perhaps they're trying to relate to us on that level and have picked a type of style to wear. Perhaps, like I said, if we're outside the realm of time here, that at some point that they had seen or witnessed somebody in that style and decided to appear today in that style. And if we're talking about interdimensional beings and being outside the realm of time, they could actually be appearing to us from another point in time. That's why we're seeing things like the different hats, because they're actually physically in that time on some other plane of existence. And thinking outside the box here, Dave Wilkerson asked, can they follow you from place to place? So this is almost like asking, can a shadow person be an attachment? Now, I've never had a shadow person follow me from one place to another. A lot of my moments have seemed to be like one-offs, except for one, which was in a house that I lived in Ohio, and the activity only lasted for a couple of months and then it went away. But I wouldn't really call that an attachment. It wasn't following me to school or anything like that. I was 13 at the time. I do have a story that I've included within the book about a set of sisters in which there was a hat person appearing at the foot of the bed of the one. All the sisters saw him, and a lot of times he would just come up and just stand there and stare down at her. He wouldn't do anything physical, but just very creepy, standing there at the foot of the bed. They ended up moving from that house, and they never saw that hat man again. So it sounds like he either lived at the house, maybe was assigned to the house, or that was its sort of realm that it would lurk in, and wasn't a type of being that would attach itself to people, but was attaching itself in a sense to the building or maybe even the land. All right, now I've had this question come up from a number of different people, but I'll go ahead and read the one by Charlie Rainbow Wolf. What's the difference between a shadow person and a skinwalker? So this is kind of interesting that I do get a lot of questions about other types of entities possibly being shadow people, and skinwalker is one that gets asked about a lot. Is a skinwalker a type of shadow person? Which to me is really interesting, because when you look at the two side by side, shadow person and skinwalker, they really only have a couple of very small similarities. They're really quite different. For one, okay, skinwalker is essentially, it's an old Navajo legend about shamans, and there are a certain sect of shamans, they're almost like a cult, that actually take on these properties of being able to shapeshift into different animals. You have to be invited in and initiated by another shaman in order to become this entity, this thing. So just looking at that on the surface, a skinwalker is a type of human being who shapeshifts into an animal, and they retain those physical properties. They don't turn into a shadow really at all. They're still a human and then an animal. Now, I think where people will relate a skinwalker to a shadow person is with the crawler type shadow people. And it really has to do with their movements. They kind of get down on all fours, they're crawling around on the ground, maybe even along walls and ceilings, that sort of thing. Going upstairs, they kind of resemble a crab. So they're kind of animalistic in nature. And some of the depictions of skinwalkers crawling around on the ground, even in their human form, kind of resemble what we think of the crawler type shadow person. But again, you have to remember with a shadow, no features, all black, not human. A true shadow person is an interdimensional being that is just shadowy in form. They may occasionally have eyes, but you see no nose, no mouth. They're not human, where a skinwalker is. And then from Tracy Merrick, what makes a shadow person show up in someone's home? And so now this is really the big question. Why are shadow people there? Why do they appear in the corner of your room, at the foot of your bed? Why do we see them darting in and out of doors, down hallways? What are they doing? Why are they there? This is something we really don't have an answer to. Now, there are some ideas out there about, especially with the Hat Man, about them being energy vampires showing up at the foot of your bed, instilling that fear into you, and then they feed off of that fear to gain energy. But that's really for the Hat Man, or sometimes the red-eyed entity is supposed to be able to do that. But really, that's kind of just relegated to one type of shadow person. You know, what about that one that just happens to go darting down the hall? I've had moments in which I've walked into a room and it's like I scared the shadow person and they took off. So I don't really think it was their feeding off of energy. Sometimes they just seem to be curious in nature, that they're observing. Maybe for some reason they're trying to observe human nature, human tendencies. They may be studying our civilization for some reason. We really don't know. There's a lot of speculation as to who and what these things are, but we're still just piecing those theories together and seeing if they kind of fit the puzzle. And they don't always completely work. You know, I said, red-eyed entities being one of those that feeds off of people's fear, but there are other times where they don't seem to be doing that. They are more like their humanoid figure counterpart, where they're just standing there staring and observing. And even the Hat Man will seem to do that sometimes. That not necessarily feeding off fear, but just standing there staring, looking, observing. And then you get a lot of those shadow wisps that are just darting around all over the place, and it seems more like they're traveling somewhere. They're not even necessarily stationary there at your location, but they're moving about doing some other task. And you may even be disrupting them, whatever it is that they're up to. The story that I talk about when I'm a young child and the shadow person crossed my arms across my body, some people speculate that it was putting me into a burial pose, so something completely different. So I hope I was able to answer some of your questions about shadow people. Continue to go ahead and throw some questions down there in the comments section. We'll go ahead and answer some more here coming up again soon. And if you haven't yet, please go ahead and pick up the new book, A Walk in the Shadows. It has a lot of that information in there that you guys are asking about. And really, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more coming up. So stay tuned and check out our other Shadow People videos off to the side. I'm Mike Ricksecker. Till next time.